I kind of expected you to have a few swimming motions
Yeah,
today.
yeah, yeah. You gotta go with the flow of the ocean. I was out there in the salt water, like, yes, oxygen, breathe. That was my hashtag, right? I am committed to the wisdom in action. So I was out there breathing and taking in the sunlight.
I love it.
Yes,
Hello,
yes,
hello, hello,
yes.
my friend. How are
How
you
are you?
today?
I am amazing. How are you doing?
I am so much recorded. I feel like a little of my energy's coming back. I feel
Good.
like, you know, it's very definite on the road to recovery. So grateful to be here with you.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what it is, a give and take, and where are you right now? And that's why I love we talk about interplay and where are you feeling great in your body and where could you, use some support and breathe in between those two places. So just checking in every day, what we need to
Right?
do. So I'm grateful for you being here as well.
Yeah. I was up at about 5 or 5:30 this morning. I woke up with energy for like the first time in 2 weeks, which
Mm,
I was like, "Whoo, there she is. She's back,"
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And and I lay there for a moment and I thought, "Okay, I'm going back to sleep. This is ridiculous. This is an hour and a half before sunrise, which I love sunrise." But my body was wide awake. And so it's like, "All
Mm,
right, I'm going to get up and write." Because you and I are working on the introduction and a few other things of weaving our
yes,
Women Connected in Wisdom book together. And so
yes,
I got it. And I love that quiet time. Like to me, for my biorhythms and just for who I am, like the whole household is quiet. The sun's not up yet. I can think really clearly. And so I got up and I was writing and tagging you on a few things. And
mm,
but then it was like my body was like, "Eek, you don't have that much energy yet, kiddo." So I went back to bed, which is so rare for me. But I was thinking about our show today, and I was thinking about practicing what I preach about body wisdom and listening to my body, and creating space and going the speed of my body as I recover. And so I think that yeah, it's important for all of us, right? But if you're recovering from an illness, if you're recovering from a big event, if you are, it's important.
it's
And
a thing. And
yeah,
and even when you're not, of course, not to minimize what you're saying and to make space for that example of how the details can play out, but especially when we are being preventative as well,
mhm,
cutting out that time to, hey, if you feel like you need a little more rest, lay back in bed. And I'm so grateful that you were able to notice that and have the space to do it. Lay back down, lay back down. Because if we need to do something twice and something that got messed up on the paperwork, or somebody calls us back and we need to do something else for our car or anything else, you got to do that. You got to do the second part of it. So, yeah.
right.
Yeah, today we're talking about we'll talk about it when we after we do our introduction, but actually yeah, let's do that so we can go ahead and hop into our conversation. What
Let's
do you
do it.
think? Okay. Hi ladies. I am Shannon Mitchell, a Black millennial business owner, the founder of Shalo Glow LLC, a handmade shea butter company. I'm your advocate for natural self-care and practical business systems.
Hi, y'all. I'm Christine Gotro, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, and published author, and dancing social worker who
Mhm.
helps you upgrade your self and community care.
Together, we are Women Connected in Wisdom, a podcast grounded in the 8 dimensions of wellness.
And we like to get together every week to have intentional conversations about how do we be wise in business relationships and wellness? How do we do this?
Yes, yes. And together, so we can go ahead and jump into it today. We are talking about occupational wellness, and that represents the feeling of purpose and productivity in one's chosen profession. This dimension is certainly a key element to what we refer to as work life balance, as an enriched and fulfilling work life is certainly required to mesh with a healthy personal life.
Woo! And I've been a little
Mhm.
out of balance lately.
Yeah, and we've talked about it. We've talked about Stacey Abrams' book the last few weeks, Leading from the Outside, and she talks about the myth of balance and how she hates that and talking about work life Jenga. And I feel
Right.
like that's really real, depending on the situation. These are the rules at work, and this is what I need to take out to keep this one situation balanced. You take that same piece out in another situation, you're gonna have a whole problem on your hands. So it's
Well, we had a
interesting.
crash. I know I
Yeah.
had a
You
crash
had a
and
crash.
had to
Yes.
rebuild, right? And
Literally.
starting and rebuilding it. And I was saying to somebody today, because as I and for our listeners that don't know, I'm recovering from COVID, and
Mhm.
it was my first time I caught it, and I am definitely vaccinated and boosted. But I was traveling when the mask mandate went down, and I'm pretty sure I picked it up somewhere. But I was talking to somebody about it. And I said, it doesn't matter who I got it from or where I got it from. I said, I have to own the piece that I was overscheduled, overworked, and under resourced. And I was not getting what I know I need. I wasn't getting my adequate sleep. I was traveling, so I wasn't, eating as clean as I usually do. Like all the things, right? All the things that keep us in balance.
Yeah.
And just having compassion for that part of myself, and also really listening to my body when it was like, oh no, sister, you are sitting down.
Yes.
And I personally know 3 folks who have long haul COVID. So I was scared straight, because I was like, the minute I got that diagnosis, I was like, oh, no, I'm going to bed, because I'm not pushing through. Because everything they said, these folks that are in my life have said, I wish I wouldn't have pushed through. I wish I would
Mm.
have rested. I wish I would have hydrated. I wish I wouldn't have pushed through. And they're women. They are people who hold households and jobs, and often don't take breaks for themselves. Some of them are artists and activists, and caregivers, like we talk about with Still Point, and we talk about it is a dangerous profession, and it affects our health if we're not paying attention. And I know our guest is going to speak to that today too. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. Yes, no, absolutely. And it's so interesting. I knew before that's the basis of Shaylo Glow, right? That's the part of the why that I'm so excited to do everything we do with Women Connected in Wisdom, is because the women have to take care of ourselves. This is not just us, oh, you might possibly end up, no, you are automatically at risk. Your immune system is being deprived sometimes because we're neglecting what we need, so take that time. Absolutely. I have a lot of body, that's a good thing, and we're supposed to be covering every part of it with shea butter. That's a lot to do. Yes. And you're worth it. And it's a lot if you're sick, so let's take the time on the side that we want to stay the most on. But I love how you say you have to give yourself grace in certain situations too. Oh, and what I've been thinking about since last week was I was trying to run a pre-pandemic schedule post-pandemic, and that's not the same thing. And I've really been thinking about that, like, oh, I can do this. I've done it before. I had 5 classes and 3 jobs. Oh, I had a full-time salary position and a side gig. Well, okay, that was before all of this other stuff. So what is it now? Reassess the situation. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
Well, and the other thing about just how much we're also holding with what's going on in our world right now,
Yes.
with the mass shootings and the racial hatred, and
And the
it is
war.
in the war, like in the legislation, like
Hmm.
it just, there is so much macro level stuff and big
Hmm.
stuff in
Hmm.
addition to our own lives and our own. And boy, this change is constant, and a lot of it is heavy right now, you know
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And
and
that's outside of family and finances and whatever the last 2 years
mhm,
is fallen, where the situations are
mhm,
today as we speak. So that's why we're talking about this. How are we taking care of ourselves as individuals, as those responsible for taking care of others, and then in a community sense, so we can
right,
sustain it? Because I know I was ready to isolate myself. My mom passed away. I said, you know what? It's too much energy. It's too
mhm,
much, but I also know the benefit of being in community and the risk of being isolated in some points, So, okay, I let me stay, but how do I do it in a healthy way so I'm not overextending myself and just pouring, pouring, pouring? That's why I'm here.
right.
Yes.
Speaking of,
Mm.
Happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
Just look at your nails and look for those y'all that are listening and not beauty
But
industry.
that's what
Yeah.
we're about to talk about, all the years coming up with Shaylo Glow. So that'll be later. But yes, to celebrating life and everything that we've had going on.
Right.
Yes, so
Well,
much gratitude.
are we ready to bring up our guest and get into
Yes.
this conversation today? Do you want
Yes,
to read the definition
absolutely.
one more time?
No problem. So, again, talking about occupational wellness specifically, and it represents the feeling of purpose and productivity in one's chosen profession. This dimension is certainly a key element to what we refer to as work life balance, as an enriched and fulfilling work life is certainly required to mesh with a healthy personal life.
All right. Our guest today, y'all, is Stephanie Calahan. And Stephanie was fast tracking her way to business and financial success. Quick promotions followed by hefty salary packages. Even though she was knocking down six figures a year, the emotional and physical blows she was absorbing were knocking the wind out of her spirit and wearing down her health. See, I knew it was right timing for this guest, right? Reacting in the right way, she initially chose the wrong solution, starting a business that not only didn't support her, it almost took her out completely. She has been in corporate America and was used to hustling, working extremely hard every day, and coming back for more again and again. It was what she did and what she knew. But after taking the leap of faith and setting up her own coaching and consulting business, as well as serving her community and helping clients and friends find the passions and path in life, she realized that she had taken on too much. Her body was starting to shut down. She had pushed herself to the limit of her personal endurance and had hit a crossroads. In her own words, I created a trap for myself where I took that toxic environment that I had in the corporate world and created my own version. Whew. I was doing things that I was really excited about, but the problem was that I did not put any of me into any of that time. Ultimately, she stepped back and redefined everything. And so she stopped and assessed. She made the difficult decision that went against who she was and what her well meaning loved ones told her to do, but knew would make her who she wanted to be. And now, with a flourishing business, a wonderful home life, and a smile that literally covers the whole of her face, this is so true, y'all. Wait till you see. Isn't she glad that she did just that? Today, Stephanie works with business service focused entrepreneurs at the intersection of heart and head to leverage their business and get their message out with power, ease, and joy so they can make a powerfully positive difference in the world, exponentially uplevel their profits, shift their mindsets toward possibility, and take a no excuse approach to boldly creating a highly successful and meaningful business built around who they are. Hello, 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 Stephanie Calahan.
Hello, hello. It's good to see you both.
Thank
Welcome to
you.
the Women Connected in Wisdom podcast. I am so glad you are here.
Yes.
I'm excited to be here. I'm excited for this conversation and happy birthday.
Thank you so much. Yes, when we were talking, so you ladies know we do our coffee and chats before we bring the experts on. I said, "Oh, occupational wellness for my birthday? Yeah, let's talk about it." Let's talk about it. So, as the birthday week, I will take the liberty of the first question because I like to jump straight into the part where sometimes if we're telling these stories in person, we could kind of talk about it and not really say anything and vaguely skim over, and then people don't really know what happened, you know? So, when we read in your bio about the thought we made the right decision, but the wrong way to fix it, right? And you start this business, and then what happens? What is it that happened? And how did that help you readjust to be more set up in a healthier way?
Yeah. So, excuse me. So, it started out what I thought was great, right? So, when I worked in the corporate space, I didn't have time for much of anything but work. I literally started work before the sun came out and I left well after the sun had gone down. In fact, when I first quit, I felt guilty if I wasn't working when the sun was out. So that kind of lets you know the mindset I was in when I started my business. And the other piece to it is I quit my job. My husband quit his job. We moved 2.5 hours south, and I had a 2.5-year-old. New house, new community, new business. And by the way, all those personal important things that I wasn't able to do for the decade plus that I was a corporate consultant, I started doing. So I became a rape crisis advocate that was paged in the middle of the night to go to the hospital when someone was sexually assaulted. I became a CASA, which is a court-appointed special advocate for children that are taken out of their homes. I got on the board of the National Association of Women Business Owner chapter in my area, right? I didn't take on small things. So I did a lot. And for a while that worked because I am now a recovering workaholic, but back then I was definitely a workaholic. I was a workaholic, I was a perfectionist, and I was a people pleaser. And all of those things combined are not a really healthy combination. And so for a while I did really well. My business was flourishing. I was winning awards in my community for being the pioneer of things and, young entrepreneur awards and that kind of thing. And I thought, I've got it. I finally got out of that toxic world. And I didn't realize I had created my own toxic world, right? I just now no longer had a boss to blame it on because I was the boss. What ultimately happened is in late 2008, I started just losing energy. My weight had skyrocketed by about 75 pounds, and I didn't understand why. Because I was doing all the things that you're supposed to do, working out, eating right, all of those things. So my weight had skyrocketed, my energy had plummeted. I had gotten to a point where my son, who was in elementary school at the time, was taking care of me more than I was taking care of him. And that's still, he's 21 now, and that's still so hard to admit. And when I say he was taking care of me more than I was taking care of him, I mean, he would come home from school and I would have enough energy to greet him and I was on the couch laying down while he was doing stuff. My husband would come home, he'd cook a meal. My elementary age son would cut that up like you would a toddler, and then he'd help me eat. That's where my energy was at the time. Fortunately, a very dear friend of mine gave me a book that I read, and I thought that book was written for me. I'm like, this woman knows who I am. And that led me down a different health path where I ultimately hired a health practitioner who helped me figure out that, along with my doctors, identified that my adrenal system was not just adrenal fatigue, it had stopped working. And for those of you that don't know, your adrenal system creates the baseline chemicals that the rest of your body needs to function. So it creates what your ovaries need and what your thyroid needs and a lot of other body functions. So as my thyroid started shutting down, so did other parts of me. So that by 2009, I was told I wouldn't see 2010. I had to have an emergency hysterectomy because of the complications that were caused. And it was just, it really wasn't a good time. It really wasn't a good time. And fortunately, like I said, I had found a very, very wise yet young holistic health practitioner that helped me figure out things that I could do to let go of perfectionism, let go of people pleasing, let go of all those unhealthy mindsets that I had in place, which interestingly enough, I was helping clients with, right? And that's important for us to note. You can be somebody that is helping somebody with the very thing that you have a problem with. And it doesn't mean you don't have the problem, because I definitely did. But ultimately, that message of you're not going to see the next year was very powerful and not what I wanted. And so I committed to changing whatever needed to be changed. And ultimately, it was just about everything.
Yes, I definitely hear what you're saying and want to give space to, again, your survival. I told you that the first time we talked about it, but I love the fact that you're still here and thriving. And also for the amount of pouring out that it takes for the roles that you picked up. I hear what you're saying. It's not just a little, oh, let me do this a week, let me do this. Being on duty for any position, I don't care what it is, that's their regular sleep schedule. Okay.
Right.
Especially with something like that. So regular sleep is one thing on the list of things that you had to deal with in those positions. So
Right.
I definitely hear what you're saying. And stepping back into work since COVID, we're working on what that looks like in everybody's life as normal. And absolutely, I've had to be reminded of scheduling in break time. Even Christine and I, we love being here live at 5 every Wednesday at 5. But wait a minute, is it actually going to be all 52 weeks? Or are we going to give ourselves a break? How we would want to give a break from a job? So, what are those things that we're used to in the workforce? And when for me specifically, working on being entrepreneurs, if you could set up your schedule to look however you want it to look, what does that look like?
Right. Right. I mean, that's critically important. And it's one thing that it's just so important. Almost every client that I ever work with has some kind of limiting belief around their schedule and what they have to do. And we have conversations about, well, who says you have to do that? Like, is that in an employee manual that you wrote? Like, who says? And it's a whole different way of thinking when you realize that you're the one that's creating this. It's a whole different level of accountability. And it's completely possible to build a life that you absolutely love, as long as you figure out how to define exactly what it is that you want and then build system, structure, and boundaries around all of it.
Woo, that boundaries is so key, Stephanie. Like we talk in Still Point, the book I'm a co-author of, about that being the fifth skill of self-care.
Oh,
The
gosh, yeah.
ability to say yes and no. That so often, especially as caregivers and women, we like to say yes. Like your story highlighted it, right? Those
Mhm.
were big, important things that you said yes to. They were making a difference in the world, but it was to the detriment of your health and well-being.
Well,
And
the reality to that is they were doing really important things in the world, but then I was taken out. Like,
mhm,
I had to quit everything, every board, every volunteer position, every room mom activity. So, how good did it really do the world for me to say
right.
yes to everything when I had an extended period of time where it had to be a no?
Exactly. Because it wasn't sustainable, right?
Right.
That's what we like to talk about on the show is like, how do we do this together that we don't have to do it by ourselves, right? We can have, you said, tell me what you said again. You said systems.
Well, I built
She
in
said,
strategic. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, she said system, structure, and then boundaries.
Yeah.
System, structure, and boundaries.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
The one thing that I've found one of the things that I did as a result of this whole rethinking was recognized that there were more professional people in the world, largely women, but even then too, that struggle with the exact same things. And I gave myself permission to start supporting clients with that. Now I went and did, all the appropriate education, knowledge building before I did, but there are so many people that are working so hard and moving so fast that they don't even know what they want. So when you start talking about building boundaries, it's like, well, to what? In my case, I was doing things that I wanted to do, right? It wasn't taking on stuff that I wanted to say no to, but I said yes to. It was stuff I wanted to do and was excited to do, but my body said no. And so one really important thing around that boundaries piece is getting really super clear about the life you want to create. Not these pockets of activities that build a life, but like this overall vision of what do you want to create? Who do you want to be in that creation? How do you want to impact the world? What's the energy you want to bring into the world and into the room? And in my case, I didn't really pay attention to that last part, right? I was so depleted that there was no energy to bring into the room, right? And if I had defined that earlier, then self-care would have been an obvious choice, but it wasn't even something on my radar to think about.
Well, and I think we're getting better in 2022, I want to say, but there's still so much stigma around that, and how people are like, oh, that's selfish. And it's like, we're not saying not pay attention to your community care or not, but what we are saying is, if you do not take care of yourself and you go down, whether that's your story of lack of energy and being within a year of death, right, at a very young age, we need our folks, we need our women, we need our caregivers and our activists and our artists and all these people that are in this category of danger, really, because they pour out so much. And entrepreneurs, we're going to put them in there too, because just what your story highlighted. And I know so many people that are doing that. And I don't think I'm completely doing it, but I think I have some traits of it, right? Like, because I lead with my value and the life I want to create. And I do have good boundaries around that but I take on too much. Like, I'm guilty, totally guilty of that piece.
Yeah, and I mean, it's important to know our strengths and weaknesses, right? It's important to be passionate about life, and we finally think about what we want for ourselves. Like you say, Stephanie, I stepped down from the salary position the first time and realized I forgot a lot about what I wanted for myself. And had you asked me while I was in that position, I wouldn't have remembered what I forgot, like Neville from Harry Potter. I've forgotten something, but I can't
Right.
seem to remember what it
Right.
is. But I will also say that everything happens for a reason, right? Even though we've seen women work for decades, these are still the first couple of decades that women have been working. So we're still working through what that looks like in our generation with the things that we're dealing with. And so what I would say, Stephanie, is that the time that you used on that board and you having to step down, and now this podcast and everything you've done since that may save countless lives. So it's worth it, it'll pay off for it.
It's so interesting that you say that, because when I was in the heat, when I was in the fire of all this, right, I remember praying and saying, okay, God, help point me to the wisdom that I need. Help point me to the people that can identify problems versus pushing drugs, because I want to know what's really going on and let's fix that. And I said, I promise that if you help me come through this, I will share my story so that I can help other people. And that's why I do these shows, right? It's why I have these conversations or go to local women's groups or what have you to share the story, because my story is mine, but my story is also ours, right? I mean, I'm the product of the same culture of,
Right.
hustle and drive and push. And you mentioned earlier, Christine, about I wish I wouldn't have pushed through. That is me for all of my 20s and a good majority of my 30s. I wish I hadn't pushed through. But since I did, and I had the results that I had, now I can take that knowledge and that learning and I can help somebody else so that they can define their life a little differently so that they don't have to have the same struggles.
So, Stephanie, I was raised by a football coach in Texas. So that's just a little bit about my background. I've mentioned that before to readers, but that pushing through is ingrained in me. It's in our culture. It's in my family culture. It is and I've done a lot of personal work on it. Like, I remember I could only take time off when I was sick. And, you and I had this conversation when we did our coffee and chat, because I've had some of those really big health issues, right? And the past couple of years, I've been much better at it, about listening to my body. This last slip up kind of was like, whoa, that was, Shannon and I talked about last week. It was a pre-pandemic schedule on a post-pandemic body. And my body was like, no. So some of my regular markers, weren't there, or I didn't catch. But all that to say, when somebody is, this is what they're used to. This is how they were raised. This is the only thing they know. Like, what is the first incremental step? What is the first incremental step to our listeners who are listening that you
So
can be proactive and not, don't be like Stephanie and Christine.
right. Be like us in other things.
Right.
Be like us in other things.
Don't be like us in this part, right? Like
Right.
what would be your piece of advice or incremental step? Like, how do you guide people and your clients to change that mindset and to also start looking at it proactively instead of reactively?
Oh, I love that. So I have like 12 different things floating through my head all at the same time, and I'm having to kind of sort and pick out which one we're going to talk about here. So first of all, I totally relate to your story. I was raised by two teachers, and I was raised in the Midwest. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the Midwest has a very common value of we're hard workers. And if you work hard enough, you're going to get whatever you want, but you're a hard worker. And one of the things that I had to do was divorce hard work. I had to acknowledge that there was a thought process that I had that had served me well, had served me really well. It had gotten me through college with a couple degrees. It had gotten me elevated into my corporate space very, very quickly. That hard work mentality had been very good for me, but I had to get real and acknowledge that it was no longer serving me. In my case, I literally held divorce proceedings. It sounds really weird, but it worked for me. I needed something structured that said, this is something that worked at one time and is no longer working. But if you're somebody that, you're not quite to that point, maybe you haven't recognized the habits that you have that are not healthy for you. One test that you can use in terms of boundaries and figuring out what you should or shouldn't say yes to is what I call the resentment test. And so this is how it works. Hey, Sally, could you help me with the bake sale tomorrow? I'm Sally. How do I feel about that? Will I have any resentment at all if I say yes? That's question number one. Will I have any resentment at all if I say yes? If the answer is yes, I will have some kind of resentment, then the next part of that decision flow is the answer is no to that specific question. Now, then you go on to the next step. Is there anything that could be changed in what was proposed to me where I could say yes? So, Sally, I can't help you with the bake sale tomorrow, but I could run a couple errands today to get you what you need. So it's a way that you can still participate in your community or whatever question that you have for, participating in something. But it's a way that you can participate without having resentment. That resentment feeling that you have is a sign that your boundaries are being crossed. And a lot of times we don't recognize, like just in natural conversation, especially if it's something that's important to us or that we feel is a worthy cause, or, we're wanting to support our community or our families or wherever we're getting the questions from, coworkers, clients, what have you. They could be really good things, just not good things for us. And so they may not cross over a defined boundary, but there could be an internal boundary. And so if you just stop and you ask yourself, if I say yes to this, will I have any lingering resentment at all? And even if it's a tiny amount of resentment, ask yourself the next question of how could this be reframed where I won't have resentment so that I can say yes, and then offer that as an alternative.
I love that so much. Such a practical way to do that. I was recently watching Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart special on HBO. Have you seen that yet, Stephanie?
No, I haven't.
You would love it because she speaks your language and you speak her language. She was talking about resentment is a part of envy. So that what it is about is, and her example in her book is, I'm not mad because you're resting. I'm mad because I'm so bone tired. I want to rest. But unlike you, I'm going to pretend that I don't need to.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah.
That's big. And what I love too about that, Stephanie, is let's say, for example, vendors, right? I have Shayla Glow. We go to markets. Somebody asks me about if I'm available May 18th, and I like to plan my time before the actual day, right? So in me, I felt myself hesitate, and it used to be a thing I didn't know what to do about. I just felt some type of way. I figured it was because of the type of personality type I was. Really, it was me wanting to be able to budget my time and know if I could say yes or no, right?
Right.
So now as a business owner, if somebody's invited me as a vendor and I don't have time, it's actually a great thing because now, okay, well, if I'm interested, I can say, when are your next 3 dates? And I can already have
Right.
my schedule planned out more.
Yeah.
Still, a no puts you in a great position. And now I've used that to my benefit as well. Christine just asked me about a time for next Wednesday. We have time blocked. Of course, that's a no-brainer, and it felt great to be able to say yes. And then the next person, we were trying to do a photo shoot. Oh, well, I'm actually out of town for my birthday. Guess I gotta push it, but I'm happy to be able to push it for myself, so I can pour into myself, and then the rest of the year we can pour into everybody else. And then when we show up, like you said, we can have more energy in the room. We can show up as more of ourselves because we're feeding the different parts of ourselves and not I'm over here starving in the corner with no water or sunlight and
Right.
everybody else is taken care of and flourishing.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And I applaud you
Thank
for
you.
figuring out that shift, right? Because you're not any worse off for that shift, right? In fact, you're from a self-care perspective, you're definitely better off. And I would imagine that your business is continuing to flourish because you're choosing to schedule more in a more healthy way.
Absolutely. And that comes from my mentor, Linda. We talk about women and chronic illnesses. She stepped down from decades in corporate America, had side gigs, started her business, and if my timeline is right, had maybe 5 years to herself, less than 5 years, and passed away. And I'm
Mm.
like, I do not want to overextend myself. And when it's time to retirement, and I'm not, I'm retiring before I'm 45. And I'm taking breaks every day up until then, because if I'm scheduled, so let's talk about that too, right? If I'm scheduled for 11 hours, that's part of two shifts. That's part of the AM shift. And in the restaurant, that's part of the PM shift. So I'm going to take some time in both of those shifts. Just like if I was AM, I would take a little time for myself, drink some water, eat something. If I'm PM, I'm going to take some time, make sure I'm not running the gas tank on E. I'm going to do that both times, and I think maybe it's easier for me to think about because I have been in a management position. So I've been over scheduling, and I was the person and will be who's being asked for breaks. So if somebody else is taking a break and I haven't taken one, sometimes that's when the resentment comes in. Or we should be working. Oh, well, let me just take my break and then I'll make sure that my team is taken care of and we can continue to move forward that way.
And it's so important for all of us to remember that we are all leaders of somebody.
Yes.
And the choices that we make directly reflect and influence the choices other people make. So in the beginning of this conversation, we talked about, society, right? We're the builders of that.
Yes.
We're the builders of that. So if we can choose, because it really is a choice, even when it doesn't feel like a choice, if we can choose to practice good self-care habits, good boundary habits, good eating and exercising, all those good things, then we are influencing other people who are influencing other people. That's important. That's really important.
I couldn't agree more. I think that listening to our body wisdom, and everybody's body wisdom is different. Everybody has different rhythms of when they like to wake up and how much they sleep, but truly getting in touch with ourselves and listening to what we need, not what we think other people, not the shoulds, not the oh, to be successful, you only need to sleep 4 hours a night. That was a trend a while back. I'm like,
Yeah.
y'all have lost your mind. No, I'm not signing up for that one ever.
Yeah, no.
But what do we truly need? And I like that when you ask Stephanie, like, what is the life we want to create? We often talk on the show about what do we value and what's our purpose, and what do we want to create out here, that
Yeah.
and that we do have that power, right? But it starts with checking in with ourselves. It starts with stopping and taking that deep breath. And yesterday, I think it was just yesterday, I was sitting on my back deck and I was taking a meeting. And somebody goes, boy, those birds are loud, right? But I had taken 30 minutes before the meeting just to sit and be and soak it in, because it's spring and it's gorgeous. And it was just feeding me just to sit there and listen to the birds and take a moment. What did I need? And I thought I needed 10 minutes, but what I really needed was 30 minutes. So I took that 30 minutes and sat there and drank a cup of tea. And yeah, and I think sometimes that's hard when we're on the treadmill. When we
Oh
are
yeah.
on the treadmill and when there is the next meeting and the email and the the really quote unquote important things, but
Yeah.
nothing is more important than our health.
Yeah. I remember I was talking to this one of my coworkers one day years ago when I first started management, and she said, "Don't base your life around a business that does not base their business around your life." And that's really important. Remember to ask yourself what you need. And also, because we could talk about the hours, and for different people, they might think of completely different categories of things to talk about with that, right? So when I think about work and occupational wellness and wanting more time to be able to take time, I I think about the 7 days a week that I've been working, and it sounds like that's out of balance, and of course it is, right? As far as what we want it to look like, but the reason I'm confident and have been comfortable working that is because I know that I'm paying off my debt. So I know I want to help all these people. If I'm going to help all these people, there has to be assets in place so that my net worth is at a certain point, and it's not going to be at a certain point if this debt is taking away from it. So pay off the debt first, make sure you're stable, and then go help people. So in order to do that, my schedule looks the way that it looks right now, but I also know why. Before, I said I don't even want to know how many hours I work. And this is what I used to say out loud, and I heard myself say it. I said, that sounds unhealthy. It sounds crazy.
Yeah.
Like, you should know how many hours you work and how many hours you have for yourself. But I didn't want to know, because I knew that I would be resentful. I would be upset because I was spending the night till 7:30. I know I don't want that, even if I'm an entrepreneur. So now I have a certain cutoff time. You know what? I hear the story I'm telling myself. I can just keep working another 2 hour block, and no, it's midnight. Go to sleep. Like, it's fine. It'll be there tomorrow.
Well, you come up with the rules that work for you. So everybody has different body rhythms, right?
Yes.
And so, like, I am not a member of the 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. That is not a club I am a member of. When I was in college, I worked from 7 at night until 7 in the morning. I am a night owl. And I acknowledge that about my body. My brain fires up later in the day. And so what I've done is I've given myself permission. I don't have any meetings that start before 10 a.m. And that's okay. And if I need to sleep later, I can sleep later. I do all of my self-care practices early in the morning so that when I hit that first meeting, I am fully there. I am not, dragging, oh, I need coffee, or, whatever. It's very common for a lot of people. I am fully present because of how I've established my schedule, and I've established my schedule off of my body rhythms. And I have a lot of clients, those well-meaning family members that when I first redefined my business that are like, Stephanie, you can't do that. I'm like, I can do anything I want. My business is mine, and it really is true. So if you happen to be watching or listening, and you're like, well, that's great for her, but I can't do it, or I don't see how. That was me. when I had to quit everything, I bawled. I mean, ugly tears with every single phone call I made. I was crying. I thought I was losing part of my identity because I was a workaholic. So I kind of was losing part of my identity, just not a healthy part. But in redefining and in slowing down and in getting super clear on what was really important, like truly soul level important, my business tripled and my clients get exponentially better results. And I'm not hustling. And with every single client that I've worked with, we found that there is a way to create their schedule. I don't create mini-me's. I work with people to help them figure out their perfect, right? And so it's different with every single client. Looking at what their values are, looking at what they want to create in life, looking at what their important visions are. Some have these just amazing, amazing ways that they're going to contribute to the world, and they've got to get the first steps figured out, right? They've got to get this balance figured out. I agree with what you were saying earlier about there's no such thing as balance.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a teacher once tell me it's just the journey towards it and it's an illusion. And I was on a retreat. I was leading a retreat one time and we were taking a hike through the woods, and I still have this picture somewhere. And I had jumped up on this stump, Stephanie. I think Shannon, I've told you this story before.
Mm-hmm.
I jumped up on this stump and I'd done the swan pose. So it looked really cool. And somebody snapped the picture right when I was balanced. I mean, it lasted literally a second. That's just the truth. That's why I always tell the story around this, because it's the truth. You're striving for balance and then whoop, something knocks you off, or the wind blows, or the world happens. And it is more like the life work Jenga that Stacey Abrams talks about.
I talk a lot about living with intention. Because if you choose your activities with intention versus by default, just by choosing with intention, you've already started to create a better life for yourself. And so part of that creating life with intention is getting super clear on what your non-negotiables are and what your flex activities are. So when you think about those different things in your life that you say yes to, there are going to be things that you're like, and I would encourage you, sit down with a pad of paper and a pen and just start writing. Here's the way that I spend my time right now. And then say, okay, what things should I be doing that's not on this list, right? And then go back a third time and go, what are those things that are non-negotiable in order for me to create the life that I really want? Because once you define what those non-negotiables are, then it makes it really easy to start slotting things into your calendar. Mm-hmm. When I first restructured everything in my business, I said, self-care is really important. And then my calendar just got filled with all kinds of stuff. I have an auto scheduler that a lot of people have. So clients and prospects and other people get this link and they can add stuff to my calendar. And I remember a specific day where I was going from, at the time I didn't have my 10 a.m. rule. I was going from 8 in the morning until 9 at night, and I had no room for bathroom breaks and I had no room for lunch. Like, okay, this automated schedule is great, but it's not great. And one of the things I did very simply was I scheduled in myself. On my calendar, I color code my calendar. That's how I can visualize that I'm balanced in the way I want. And so self-care is a purplish, plumish color, similar to my walls. And so I can do a week view or a month view because of my color coding. And that's how I stay accountable to myself to see, am I doing the right, am I having a good balance of self-care? Am I having a good balance of client time? Am I having a good time? Am I having a good balance of, family care and my spiritual life and business development stuff? And it's a really easy way for me to see in a visual way, am I doing what I say I'm supposed to do? And it's a way that I can keep accountable to myself.
I love that. Yeah, I knew. So I knew, Shannon, when Stephanie said system, structures, and boundaries, like you were like, I'm in. I'm in
Yeah,
for the long haul. I have
absolutely.
a quick question because I know we're going towards wrap up, but Stephanie, we like to ask almost all our guests, like, what is a self-care practice or a wellness practice that is non-negotiable for you? Like, what is something that is a part of your routine and rhythm that helps you sustain?
I actually have 3 that are non-negotiable every day. I start the day before I ever get out of bed with meditation, prayer, and visualization. I lumped that all into one. That wasn't my 3. But it's time, again, to set intention, to get really clear, to get grounded, so that when the minute I get out of bed, I'm on a good footing for my day. The second one that's non-negotiable for me is water. I drink half my body weight in ounces of clean, healthy water every day. And that was something that helped save my life. So when my health coach told me to do that, originally I thought he was trying to drown me, quite literally. I was not a water drinker. But I've learned how to consume that kind of water, and the amount of focus and energy that just simple water can bring to you. If you're if you're having problems with foggy thinking, you might be dehydrated. It might not be that you need more caffeine. It might mean you need to go get some water. And then the third thing that's a non-negotiable for me is what I call energetic hygiene. And so at night, you wash your face, you brush your teeth, you do all your physical hygiene stuff, but then I do what I call energetic hygiene. And that's where I mentally look over the day and I identify anything that caused me stress, anxiety, anger, resentment, anything that I don't want to take with me into the next day. And I process that. I may do forgiveness work. I may do some EFT tapping to work through something. I have a lot of different tools that I use, but I make sure that before I lay down at night, that I have cleared away anything that just needs to stay in that day and not go with me to the next day. And that practice was life transforming for me. My sleep got better. My energy got better. When I woke up in the morning, I wasn't, mentally carrying a bunch of gunk, which made it easier for me to be doing those morning practices and be grounded and move forward. So those are 3 of my non-negotiables that I have to have in every day.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. Those are awesome.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Shannon, you got a question or some comments?
Oh, there's so much more I want to talk about. Occupational wellness is so important, especially when we're talking about overextending ourselves and having a system in place. But I don't think I have a question, especially since we're at our wisdom in action. And I'm interested to hear what you ladies are working on this week. But what I will say is the system, the structure, and the boundaries. I know we brought that up a couple of times, but it's so important. Again, we talk about me being practical business systems. That's great. For me, that's knowing what to do. Is there a standard operating procedure that's going to tell me what to do? Now, the structure, are we supporting what we said we were going to do? That could be the
Right.
actions. Network
Yeah.
marketing, I'll be honest, I wasn't doing what I needed to do. I found out when no money was coming to my account. I said, where is the money? I said, where is the money? I said,
Right.
oh, I haven't done any of this stuff. None of this stuff is crossed out. So the structure for what we say we want, and then our boundaries to make sure that we're operating in a healthy place, whether that's with ourselves or with the people around us. I love that, and I think that when we work on that, that'll help create some healthier foundations for our occupational wellness so we can feel, like we're doing what we want to do and being contributing partners and everything else, but also taking care of ourselves.
Well, and talking on that point, I have 2 blog posts on my site that could be helpful in relation to this that I could share for your show notes.
Yes, please.
I have an article when we talk about boundaries and resentment and saying no. I
Yes.
have an article that I call The Nice Ways to Say No.
Beautiful.
That goes through a bunch of different scenarios that you might consider on how you can say no, because a lot of us want to be nice people. A lot of us don't want to be the bad guy. And yet sometimes saying no is the best thing you can do, even for the person that's asking you about something.
Yeah.
And so I'll share that article that you can put in the show notes. And then the other thing that gosh, could be a show all in of itself that we don't have time for today. But I was thinking as we were talking about this drive to do more, and frequently that is tied to a mindset called imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And imposter syndrome, just in really short form, is us feeling like we're not enough in some way, shape, or form. And the article that I can share for our listeners on that is an article that goes through, number one, what imposter syndrome is, as well as a self-evaluation with a bunch of, do you do this? Do you do that? To help you identify if imposter syndrome might be something that's keeping you from establishing those self-care practices or those boundary practices that you have in place. Because like I said before, if you've got these things going on in your subconscious, you may not have a direct idea of what to do to get yourself accountable to building the life you want to live. So, and that article also shares a number of very famous people, including Albert Einstein, that had imposter syndrome. So you can see that you're not alone. So I can share those for the show notes, kind of as additional information that could help with this conversation.
That would be awesome. And also, folks can find you on your website at stephaniecalahan.com. We will put that in the show notes, and then we'll put in all your social media so folks can follow you, because that's how I found you. I think it was Instagram. That's how you and I connected. And Stephanie has a great post out there, y'all. And we're just so delighted that you came today.
Yes.
So, Stephanie, we close this conversation. Go ahead.
That's what I was about to ask. Yeah, so we close the conversation with a wisdom in action and what we're all doing this week in this specific category. So for your occupational wellness, what is your hashtag for what you're working on this week?
Oh, for my occupational wellness, my hashtag is actually focus on sleep. So I have had some challenges with our canine friend that is sleeping on the floor right to my right. He has been waking me up a lot during the night, so my sleep is not correct. And so I've finally gotten him, we figured out why, and we've gotten him square. Now he's sleeping through the night, but I've kind of built these habits of not being asleep. So my focus and action for every aspect of me this week is to get my sleep straight.
Love it. Yes.
Love it.
I will go next, Christine. Mine is to be off. Hashtag be off, because we're not supposed to be working. And you know how it is. You're supposed to be off and you're thinking about something. Your mind is no. Be present where you are with the palm trees and celebrating. And you already have a plan to take care of that when it's time to do that. And you know I like to do multiple. So I also say hashtag say no, because we've been talking about that. And I had a professor, thankfully, shout out to Professor Donovan, that said, Shannon, you never say no. You need to say no sometimes. And that's a conversation I'm getting ready for, keeping some boundaries and saying, no, this is actually what we're going to do. So, yes. My
Love
hashtags.
it.
What about you, Christine?
Oh, I am pulling one from Stephanie that she said earlier, hashtag divorce hard work.
I like
So
that.
I'm going to be traveling this weekend to see my family in Texas. And so, you know, it's always easy to slip into old patterns of behavior. And my dad is a farmer, and he, you know, there's always work to be done. And so I'm going to hashtag divorce hard work, even in the midst of those family dynamics. So,
yes.
Yeah, I think it's a good time for me to do that. And
yes.
Yeah, it's one of those, you know, we didn't talk about this, and Stephanie, we're gonna have to have you back sometime, because I know we have so much more to talk about. But
yes, we do.
I'd love to.
I think about these issues, like I've done a lot of work on these issues, right, over the years, and they're kind of like a spiral. Like you do work on them, and then you'll circle back around, and all of a sudden they're back in your face, and you're like, "Whoa, where'd that come from? I thought we cleared that, or I thought I did that work." And sometimes it's the age we are, or the stage we are, or who we're around, and other people's energy. Natural. And absolutely. So I think about that as I'm about prepping for this trip. It's like, yeah, I've done some of this, and I slipped into some old patterns of behavior. So checking ourselves, and that. I think I'm going to add one to ours. I'm going to copy your lead, Shannon. Hashtag be intentional. because
Mhm.
I love that. I love living my life intentionally. And thank
Yes.
you for that reminder, Stephanie, that,
Yes.
when
You're welcome.
we start with intention, we've
Mhm.
already made a difference.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So thank you so much for being here in this conversation. We are grateful for you, and we
Yes.
will put all your connection information in the show notes so our listeners
Mhm.
can connect with you and reach out. And we're just so grateful for your work in the world and for you sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank
Thank
you for
you.
having me on. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So awesome,
Yes.
right? I feel
Yes.
like we could have 2 or 3 shows with Stephanie
No, definitely.
and just keep bringing us back, right?
Mhm.
We
Yes,
didn't
all
we didn't confess to our listeners or to Stephanie while she was on. I remember our coffee and chat with her,
mhm.
and you and I were in such a busy frame that day, and we were like, and it's a miracle Stephanie came on because I'm sure she was like, "Woo, what is happening here?"
But I don't think so. I think we do a great job, and if we were clearly she made it on the show, our practical business systems are working, and that's why you have them, right? But I also think that women are good at we know that we all handle a lot, so sometimes it might pass by how much somebody has on their plate or that they might
Right,
need to slow down or things like that.
right.
And so that's usually why when I check in with people, I ask, how much water have you had? How have you been
Hmm.
sleeping? Those are the first two I usually go to.
Well, and when we have our manifesting calls on Monday, we have our Monday manifesting mastermind that we do, y'all.
Mhm.
We literally check in with each other
Yeah, we
as
do.
far as our sleep and and we have been together for a couple of years now. So we
Sure.
also are accountability buddies for each other on
Mhm.
this. We put down our work goals, but we put down our self-care goals too.
Yeah.
Because it's harder sometimes to hold each other accountable for those self-care goals,
Mhm.
but it is also, you don't have to do it by yourself. Like,
And
get a buddy.
yeah,
Partnership power.
and it's what you said last week too, Christine, that we forget to schedule the things that we just naturally do. Cleaning the bathroom, let's say 30 minutes, let's say 15 minutes on a little wipe down, it depends on how big your bathroom is, what you're doing. What about cooking and prepping? All that stuff has to be accounted for the 168 hours. So, intentionality. I like that hashtag.
Right?
Yes.
Well, my friend, I am so grateful as always to have these conversations with you and to
Yes,
be
me
in
too.
community with you. And I know we could say so much more, but we're a little out of time.
It's
So,
okay. Maybe we'll start a podcast or something, have somewhere to put all these words. We should write a book or something. I don't know.
right?
Let's talk about it.
Something.
Yes. Okay, ladies, we will see you next week live at 5. Thank you so much for joining us as we talked about occupational wellness. In the meantime, be well, be wise, be whole. We'll see you next week.
See you soon.